I thought it was just another Sunday, lawn chairs, lemon cake, and the kind of chatter that fills the small rooms of a house full of history. Then my grandson handed me a folded scrap of paper and said 3 words that made the floor tilt under me. What he surprised me with that afternoon changed how I remember a lifetime with Stephen. Before I begin, tell me, which cities are you watching us from tonight? Drop your town in the comments. I'd love to know who's listening. I'm Kimberly, and I'm speaking from the little house where my husband and I have spent more summers than I can count. It had the ordinary warmth of family gatherings, sunlight slanting through the kitchen window and catching the dust motes like tiny planets. Stephen hunched over his chair at the table, carving the roast with the same steady hands that had mended fences and fixed engines when we were younger. The barbecue smoke drifting from the yard, mixing with the smell of coffee and lemon icing. Our children and grandchildren filled the rooms with noise and ease, laughter, a stray football thump against the porch, my granddaughter humming the old songs I used to sing when they were small. At 78, I have learned a few things about pleasure. There's the big stuff, the weddings, the funerals, the long goodbyes. And then there's the tiny, stubborn joy of watching someone you love lift a glass because they remembered to. That day I felt both kinds, gratitude for the people around me and a small, prickly awareness of the years stacking up. When I caught my reflection in the window, silver hair pinned back, my reading glasses dangling on a chain, I smiled at the woman I see in family photos and then wondered, briefly, if I would always remember how to get from the kitchen to the bedroom without thinking twice. Stephen caught my eye across the table. He always did that little thing with his fingers when he wanted me to notice, a flick of the wrist, a raised brow. And we shared an instant of private amusement, like we'd been sharing the same joke for half a century. He's been my compass, patient, steady, and stubborn in all the ways that matter. He made coffee with a ritual that could rival any sermon. He kept his tools in order and his heart open. When folks say marriage is an old song, for us it's been a whole album, the good tracks, the skips, and the ones you play until the grooves wear thin. The grandchildren were running in and out like they owned the place, which of course they do. Plates clattered, voices overlapped. I was telling a story about a dance I'd taken with Stephen at 19 when a young hand slipped into mine while I was still gesturing. It was Marcus, my eldest grandson, all knees and earnestness, the kind of man who looks older when he's thinking. Marcus is 30. He's the one who calls me on rainy Thursdays to ask if I need anything from the store. He's also the one who can be quiet in a room full of noise, watching like a photographer waiting for the right light. He pulled me aside as if we were conspiring. "Grandma," he whispered, "can I talk to you for a minute?" His voice was low, the sort of hush that felt like something important was about to cross the room. We stepped onto the back porch, where the late sun made the paint on the railing glow. The kids kept playing. On the other side of the glass, Stephen told a joke and everyone laughed. Marcus leaned on the railing and looked at me like he owned my face for a moment, like he knew where the lines were and wanted to read them. "I found something," he said, and for a second I thought it would be one of his usual discoveries, an old baseball card, an unfinished model airplane. Instead, he reached into his jacket and brought out a small, battered shoebox tied with twine. The paper was worn, corners softened by time and handling. My heart did that odd stutter that it has done since I was a young girl, and someone offered me a secret. "I was cleaning out the attic," he said. "I know we all told the kids to leave the old boxes alone, but I couldn't help it." He set the box on the porch table between us. There were letters inside. I thought you should see them. I blinked. Letters. My stomach tightened with a mixture of curiosity and a little fear. There are things in an attic that fix you to the floor, forgotten photos, medals, or pieces of paper that dredge up whole eras. I thought of the last time I had been through the attic. It had been years, and I'd only climbed up there to find a quilt or to fetch a tin of ornaments. We had assumed most of Stephen's things were accounted for. We had assumed we knew the stories. Marcus untied the twine with careful fingers and lifted the lid. The smell that rose, dust, old paper, a faint sweetness like pressed flowers, was so familiarly domestic it felt like a small prayer. Inside were envelopes, some yellowed at the edges, others sealed with a patient hand. The top one had my name on it in Stephen's handwriting. Kimberly. The sight of his script, the slant, the way he drew his eyes, made a sound in my chest I couldn't name. I didn't open them before, Marcus said. I wanted you to. If you want me to. If you want me to read them, I will. I thought maybe we could. My fingers shook. I'd been married to Stephen long enough to know the cadence of his silence. There had always been stories he told out loud and ones he tucked away, ones he safeguarded like a secret garden. The idea that there were letters addressed to me that I had never read, that he had written to me and then kept the words folded in August quiet, felt like discovering a whole new room in our house. Did he write these recently? I asked, because my mind jumped to the practical immediately. Stephen was as steady as ever, but everyone has invisible tides we don't always measure. Marcus shook his head. No. Some are from years ago. From before you and Grandpa got married, actually. Some are from times we didn't expect. He looked at me with a softness that made my throat ache. I found others too, letters to people I don't know. I wanted to bring them all out. I thought you might want to. I don't know. Remember. Or forgive. Or laugh. Remember. Forgive. Laugh. The words were little keys to a house that might have rooms I'd never entered. I thought of the young Stephen I had courted, the man who brought me dandelions scraped from the lawn, and who once, during a rainstorm, stood in the doorway and sang the whole radio to himself as if the words were prayers. I thought of the grown Stephen who learned to be tender when life demanded it, and I thought of the way we had kept each other's secrets, like a pair of hands cupped around a flame. Read one, Marcus said. If you want. I'll read them with you if you want. I thought, if you'd let me, maybe we could go through them together. Slowly, like an old movie. His offer was simple, but to me it felt like someone handing me a map of a place I had been living in my whole life, but had never seen on paper. We carried the box inside, into the cool hush of the living room where Stephen had dozed in his armchair. He woke when I walked in, the way old sailors wake before a storm and know, without looking, what's coming. What have you got there? Stephen asked, squinting over the rims of his glasses. He never liked surprises, unless they were the kind you could eat. Marcus smiled like a man who had been holding a secret for too long. Letters, he said. Your letters, Grandpa, to Grandma, from back when you were both young. For a moment it was as if the clock in the room stopped to listen. Stephen's face folded into something I hadn't seen in a while, a careful, expectant expression, part amusement, part something more tender. He reached out and rested his hand over mine, that small, ordinary gesture that meant, in our language, stay with me. Open them, Stephen said, and his voice was a little softer than usual. He always wanted me to open things. Even when he was stubborn, when he held his cards close, he liked the idea of time being honest. I want to hear it. Sit down. Tell me everything. I slid into the chair next to him and let the room take its breath. Marcus opened the first envelope like a man stepping through a doorway. He read aloud, and the letters began like a ribbon unfurling. Small, exact sentences that surprised me because they were both unfamiliar and utterly known. They talked about small events, a flea market purchase, a shipment of strawberries, and about the way Stephen had loved simple things. They spoke of a promise made long ago, of a place he had always wanted to show me, but never had the courage to travel to. As Marcus read, the afternoon light leaned in closer. I could feel it on the fine hairs of my arm, warm and attentive. The grandchildren's laughter filtered through the glass, and for each sentence Marcus read, another layer of the past peeled back. I found myself laughing at lines I'd never heard him say out loud, and crying in a way that surprised me, not sharp and startling, but slow and honest, like rain soaking into thirsty soil. When Marcus reached for the last envelope, he paused. He looked at Stephen, then at me. There was a steadiness in his gaze I hadn't seen before, a decision made on behalf of the family, a bridge he wanted to lay. "Grandma," he said, "I did something." He took a breath that carried years and plans and the kind of hope young people like to keep private until the moment they have to be brave. "I booked 2 plane tickets. I can't tell you everything right now, but I need you to promise me one thing. When I tell you why, you'll hear me out, no matter how it sounds." For a second, the porch, the kitchen, the radio, even the tick of the old clock on the mantel, all seemed to bend toward the little word promise. I looked at Stephen. He squeezed my hand, the way he always did before making a decision that included me. His eyes were bright, and in them was that old hunger for something new and untried. "Promise," I said, and meant it. Marcus smiled, relieved and somehow filled. He slid the final note across my lap and folded his hands. "When you're ready," he said, "I'll read it." I smoothed the paper with hands that know the feel of many things: flour, paint, and the comforting weight of bills paid on time. Then I turned the envelope over, feeling the hum of the family around us, and the house seemed to settle like a held breath. There are places in our lives where you can feel a change in the air before you see it. The note in my hand smelled faintly of lemon and dust and the same sunlight that lay across the porch. Inside, the words waited like someone who had been standing politely at the door, waiting for me to notice. I lifted the flap. The sentence I read first was small, honest, and it felt like the first strike of a match. Marcus looked at me, joined by Stephen, and the rest of the family, even now, through the glass, were playing as if nothing had happened. But inside that small moment, something had. I won't tell you what it said yet. There's too much to say, and I want to do it right. For now, I'll end here, with the porch light coming on, the sky going gentler, and my heart beating a little faster than usual. When you come back for the rest of the story, I'll tell you what Marcus did next, and what those words asked of us. The porch light flickered softly as the sky deepened into the kind of blue that feels almost velvety at night. I held the letter in my hands like it was a fragile bird, unsure whether to open it slowly or all at once. Marcus and Stephen waited quietly, their eyes on me, steady and expectant. The grandchildren had wandered back inside, their laughter now muffled by the walls, leaving a hush that seemed to stretch across the yard. It felt like the world had paused just for us. I unfolded the paper and began to read. The handwriting was familiar, unmistakably Stephen's from decades ago, firm, deliberate, with those little curls on the capital K that I had always loved. The words themselves were simple, but the meaning hit me like a tide. He wrote about moments we had shared that I thought I had forgotten, recollections from the quiet corners of our life together. He reminded me of dances in the kitchen when no one was watching, the long walks through the autumn leaves, and the nights we spent talking under the stars when our children were small and curious. But there was more. The letter didn't just recount memories. It was a confession, a revelation that Stephen had carried for years. He had always admired the way I navigated life, the way I held our family together, and yet he admitted he had been too afraid to say something aloud, something he thought might alter the course of everything. Reading it, I realized he had been trying to tell me that even after all these years, he was still learning to understand the depth of his own feelings, that our love had grown in ways neither of us had fully acknowledged. Marcus was watching me closely, sensing the swell of emotion but remaining silent. There's a rare kind of intimacy that comes from watching someone you love be touched by words you know they've longed to hear. I could feel my chest tightening, and tears began to slip without permission. Not tears of sorrow, but of recognition, the deep, slow acknowledgement that love, even after decades, can still surprise you, still make you feel like a young woman all over again. I looked up at Stephen. His eyes glimmered in the porch light, unashamed of the vulnerability he had bared on paper but never spoken aloud. He reached for my hand again, our fingers intertwining naturally, as though no time had passed between the writing of that letter and this moment on the porch. "Kimberly," he said softly, "I wanted you to know. All these years I wanted you to know." I squeezed his hand, unable to speak at first. The weight of the moment settled over me like a blanket. Finally, I managed to whisper, "I never stopped knowing, Stephen. But hearing it, it's different. It feels like discovering a hidden room in our house we never knew existed." Marcus smiled at us, a quiet, approving grin. "That's exactly why I brought them," he said. "I thought, maybe some things are better when you see them all laid out, when you can share them together." His words were gentle, yet they carried the wisdom of a man who had seen the love between his grandparents and wanted to honor it without disrupting it. For a long while, we just sat there. The porch seemed to hold us in a bubble of quiet reflection. The breeze carried the faint scent of summer flowers from the garden, mingling with the lingering aroma of the roast we had eaten hours before. I realized that time, with all its twists and turns, had given us this, the ability to be fully present, to recognize the layers of love, respect, and understanding that had accumulated over decades. Then Marcus spoke again, his voice breaking the stillness in the softest possible way. "There's something else," he said, holding up another envelope from the shoebox. "I think you should read this one together. I thought it might be easier if it's shared." I nodded, and Stephen leaned closer. We opened the envelope together, and inside were letters from Marcus himself, notes he had written over the years, some of them never sent, some just observations he wanted to share with us. They were reflections on his own growth, the ways he had come to understand family, love, and the quiet sacrifices that happen every day. Some were humorous, some tender, and some made me gasp with the maturity of a young man who had seen more than his years might suggest. Reading them aloud together became a ritual. The words wrapped around us, connecting past, present, and future. We laughed at his witty observations, paused to absorb the more poignant ones, and sometimes just held each other as the realization sank in, that family is a living, breathing thing, not just a set of people under one roof, but a network of hearts learning from one another. Hours passed without our noticing. The sky had turned to a deep, soft black, and the stars were scattered like silver confetti. Finally, Marcus said softly, "I think this is what I wanted to give you. Not just letters, but a chance to see us all, together, in a way that's honest and open." I looked at Stephen, my husband of more than 50 years, and felt a swell of gratitude that was almost dizzying. "He's right," I said. "This is more than family time. This is a gift I never expected." Stephen nodded, and I could see the quiet pride in his eyes. Pride in his family, pride in the love we had built, and pride in the courage it took to finally share what had been held close for so long. "It is," he agreed, "and it's ours. All of it." That night, as the house grew quiet again, I thought about how life has a way of surprising you, even when you think you know every corner of it. My grandson's thoughtful gesture, the letters from my husband, the laughter and reflections we shared, they reminded me that emotional connection doesn't diminish with